Even a man who is pure in heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright. Hey you guys, welcome back to C-Squad Cinema, a compendium for physical media, film reviews, ramblings, and other nerdy movie talk. Well, for some of us, spooky season has been in full swing for well over a month now, and tonight is a full moon. So I thought it would be fun to compare and contrast The Wolfman from 1941 to The Wolfman from 2010. Now, there was a whole stack of new Scream Factory releases in the month of October that I was over the moon about. And the one I was most excited for was the 2010 remake of The Wolfman. Now, in the great debate over cinematic movie monsters, there are vampire people and there are werewolf people. Typically, vampire films seem to draw all of the focus. I mean, how many different versions of just Dracula are there? Not to mention all the peripheral horror involving vampires of some kind. You know, at a glance, it seems like there are way more vampire horror movies out there than there are werewolf ones. But I would argue, my friends, that werewolf movies are actually plentiful and oftentimes of way better quality than any of that vampire nonsense. Werewolf movies are just freakier and more meaningful to me because they're typically tackling the duality of a man's psyche. Werewolf stories are just ripe for thematic depth and metaphoric storytelling. Bottom line, in the cinematic war between vampires and werewolves, I fight with the werewolves. Kate Beckinsale, I'm sorry, I still love you. Call me. Speaking of Kate Beckinsale, that brings me to 2004's Van Helsing, directed by Stephen Sommers, who did the Mummy films. When that movie came out, I freaking loved that thing. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty cheesy, and there's a ton of CGI, but I just remember having a really good time watching it. You know, it has great energy, and the homage to the classic Universal monster horror films, it's all over the screen. I'm a big defender of that movie, and I remember when it released on DVD, one of the releases was this big deluxe box set that had a copy of the original Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Wolfman. So that Halloween, I got together with a big group of friends and we watched Van Helsing, but we watched all the classics as well. And that was the first time I ever saw the Wolfman from 1941. And holy shit, for a movie of its age, that makeup is iconic. Now, this is a pretty quick, efficient film at only an hour and 9 minutes. This was written by Kurt Siodmak, and that really famous quote essentially gives you the heart of the story itself. This is about Larry Talbot. He's a good man, pure in heart, and he gets bitten by what he believes is just a wolf, but pretty soon he transforms into a man-wolf hybrid himself. Now, how he grapples with that, along with some family and community drama, that fills out the rest of the story and really gives us that metaphoric aspect. It's made clear early on when Larry comes home after the recent death of his brother that there's a little bit of turmoil with him and his dad's kind of resentful that he's been away so long. So after they initially kind of patch things up, Larry then meets a woman in the community, Gwen, and falls in love with her, but she's engaged to another guy. Then after he gets bit by the wolf and transforms, he's desperate to seek some answers and goes to his father for help. And while his dad, John, is supportive, he also thinks that Larry might be going a little nuts, and this is all in his mind. And spoiler alert, Larry is killed at the end by his own father, who doesn't know that the Wolfman is his son. Now, my favorite line from this movie comes from a scene where Larry asks Dr. Lloyd if he believes in werewolves, to which Dr. Lloyd replies, "I believe that a man lost in the mazes of his mind can imagine that he is anything." And that's what's so relevant about this story now. You know, here's a guy who's kind of becoming enclosed on all sides. The stress of the situation, the turmoil with his family and the community. The woman he loves doesn't love him back. He's lost his brother. There's this complicated relationship with his dad. And these issues all start to stack up and take their toll. So the Wolfman literally becomes this metaphor for the savage nature within a man that can take hold when his grip on reality is shattered. And for a film of 1941, the makeup is still very effective, even now. I mean, look at that. And, the set they use for the forest is this completely fog-laden environment that really just sets the mood, really sells the spooky atmosphere, and gives you a sense of this very claustrophobic space. The performances are pretty standard for a horror flick of the time, but I think that Claude Rains really elevates this film as Larry's father, John. Claude Rains was sort of like the Gary Oldman of his era. He's sort of in everything, but he always brings this real strong gravitas to whatever he does. And let me tell you, The Wolfman from 1941 is an exceptional example of how vital 4K restorations can be, especially with HDR. If you've never watched a black and white film on 4K, you need to do that as soon as possible. The black and white contrast is such a perfect canvas for HDR, and seeing a film from 1941 restored to this degree is so impressive. What a testament to film preservation that a film can look this good and probably better than it did at the time. But I had a ton of fun revisiting this movie. This is the Steelbook variant of the 4K release. So you have this incredible image on the front, no title, which I love. This is a matte finish, and you just get the image of the Wolfman against the full moon. And then on the back, there he is lurking around the foggy environment. So when you open this up, you get a 4K disc and a Blu-ray disc. And then this image over here. This is a great release from Universal. I would argue that if you've never seen this, get out, find yourself a copy, and give this a spin for the spooky season. I think you're really going to like it. Now, the 2010 version of The Wolfman essentially tells the broad strokes of that story, but also expands upon it in some really important ways. Larry is played by Benicio del Toro, and the script, written by Andrew Kevin Walker and David Self, expands on his backstory by giving him this past involving him being committed for what is likely PTSD due to him witnessing the death of his mother at a young age. The script also makes Gwen the fiance of Larry's brother Ben, who we see get killed in the opening scene of the movie. Now, at the beginning of the movie, Larry first learns that Ben is missing. This is what prompts him to come home to search for his brother before he finds out that he has, in fact, been murdered. And Larry's father is played by the brilliant Sir Anthony Hopkins and sort of welcomes Larry home with this really unexplained, sinister undertone. And the mystery of the wife's death and the history surrounding that obviously plays an important role in the story and elevates the tension between Larry and his father. And this is further complicated as Larry falls in love with his deceased brother's former fiancée, Gwen. And if you've seen this, the ultimate identity of the werewolf that bites Larry and starts him on his transformation is a change from the original film, and makes the character arc Larry goes through a lot more personal and dramatic, in my opinion. These are great changes, but it really preserves the heart and core of the story, while at the same time giving it this very sinister, sort of angry tone that makes the stakes more personal. Now, here's what's really interesting. The original Wolfman from 1941 was contemporary for its time. The characters wear modern-day attire. They have cars, they have modern technologies like phones, and the remake is a period piece. It takes place in like 1891, and I think that's a really smart choice. It gives Joe Johnston's direction this focus that makes this a really, really good gothic horror story. And I have no idea why, when this released in 2010, it didn't do better than it did. I loved this in the theater and have owned the Blu-ray for a really long time. So when they were going to release this 4K, I freaked out. But here's why I pre-ordered from Shout Factory, which is something I almost never do. I should more often, because this thing actually came in a couple of weeks early, but you get this alternative cover art. I mean, look at that image. I think that this cover does a better job at selling the overall sort of tone of the movie, but also still feels like a classic Universal monster image. And then the back cover is just a still from the movie itself. I believe this is at Ben's funeral early on in the movie. And on both the original Blu-ray and this new 4K release, you get both cuts of the movie. Now, there's the theatrical cut, which I like it just fine, and then the extended director's cut, which gives the movie this extended opening and a whole sequence on a train that I think does a much better job of establishing Larry's personality. There's also a pretty extended cameo early on by the late, great Max von Sydow, and it's good stuff. I think the film took a lot of flack for the CGI transformations, which, look, I get it, especially when you compare them to something like An American Werewolf in London or The Howling, both from 1981. But here's the thing. The budget for this film, it's there on the screen. You can see where the money is. It's got this really lavish production design that really sells the gothic tone of the film. And quite frankly, this is some of Rick Baker's career best monster makeup effects. I mean, Benicio del Toro looks incredible as the Wolfman. And there's some really just gnarly, brutal gore in this movie. The violence is like through the roof. It's awesome stuff. And quite frankly, the CGI transformations, to me, hold up better than you would expect, especially now that the film has been rendered in 4K and gets an HDR pass. I think they do a pretty good job of blending it with the ending makeup effects. They're just sort of this side of reality, obviously, but I think that gives them an almost even eerier appearance, if that makes sense. So, of course, other than the alternate slipcover that I got from pre-ordering this from Scream Factory, the inside cover is just the standard theatrical poster art. And here's what's really great that Scream Factory has been doing with releases as of late. For movies that have two cuts, you get a full-on dedicated 4K disc for the extended cut, but you get a whole second 4K disc for the theatrical cut. And then you get a Blu-ray that has both cuts on the same disc. That's a lot of value. I think that's great that Scream Factory is doing that. They're not trying to save money and space by cramming both cuts on the same disc. You get two discs with whatever version of the movie you prefer. And the transfer on this thing is gorgeous. I mean, the opening sequence, the red titles just pop off the screen. It's awesome. And even in the opening scene where Ben's walking through the forest, the increase in detail is immediately obvious compared to what was on the Blu-ray, which actually still looks pretty good for its age at this point. So I think that this release is incredible from Scream Factory for one of my favorite horror films to watch around the spooky season. And it's not a perfect film by any means. I think the ending fight sequence smacks of maybe some studio interference or different from what they were originally going to do, but it still has entertainment value, right? And overall, I think the production design of the movie and the tone and the performances and the drama that is in the story now compared to the original just makes for a really great watch for this time of year. So there you have it, guys. That's The Wolfman and The Wolfman. I think it makes for a really fun double feature this time of year, especially when the autumn moon is bright and full. You know what I'm saying? So as I said in my intro video, I want to do some giveaways, and I'm going to follow through on that. I'm going to start right away. So if you're interested in The Wolfman, or if you've seen the remake and you like it, I am going to be giving away my Blu-ray copy. Now, this has both cuts of the movie. It's got really good picture quality, like I said, for a film that was sort of released early in the Blu-ray cycle, and comes with a DVD as well. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and put a comment down below, and I will pick one at random and announce it on my next video, and then I'll reach out and we can figure out a way to get this into your hands, because it's a great flick, and I love to share it with people that either haven't seen it yet or love it as much as I do. So that's it. Keep it right here with C Squad Cinema. I'll have more for you throughout the spooky season and through the rest of the year. I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.